Welcome into another episode of Frogs Insider. I'm Melissa Treebwasser, joined as always by a groggy and frustrated Jamie Plunkett, but a Jamie Plunkett nonetheless. We'll let him tell you why, because I know everyone turns into the Frogs Insider podcast to listen to Jamie Plunkett talk fantasy football. Um, but but in but in addition to getting Jamie's play-by-play recount of fantasy football, we're also going to discuss TCU's win over Houston by a score 36-13 in Houston on Saturday night. We can do so because we're sponsored by Hell's Half Acre Sporting Goods and Home Field Apparel, two organizations that we support wholeheartedly and are super thankful for. We're also super thankful to be a part of the Dave Campbell's Texas Football Republic of Football Podcast Network, your one-stop shop for all the college football news in the state of Texas. We appreciate each and every one of you that listens every week to our show, as well as the work of our friends across Republic of Football Network. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave a rating for our podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and check out what we're doing on social media at both our personal Twitters at Frog Preacher and at the Coach Melissa and the Frogs Insider Instagram account. Those things do matter and they do help. So we appreciate those you guys that have done so to this point. So things that also count are winning conference games, Jamie. And after a little bit of a slow start to the season for the Horned Frogs, they went down to Houston and basically did whatever they wanted for 4 quarters against a Cougars team that I think we thought would have a little bit more juice for a conference opener, but coming off of a loss to Rice, I guess it's not too surprising that the atmosphere was maybe left a little bit to be desired.
Yeah, it was really disappointing. I'll be honest. 'Cause, like I said, I drove down there and it just was not a good atmosphere at kickoff, which I was really surprised by. I got into town, and granted, I got into town at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was pouring down rain, and so there was not good weather in Houston on Saturday. But I still expected the stadium to at least be full. And it filled up a little bit about halfway through the first quarter, but there was no way it was at any point in time more than 65, 70% full for a stadium that says it holds 40,000. A pretty disappointing show from the Houston fans for their first Big 12 conference game. And then TCU really didn't give them anything to cheer about for the whole game because the Frogs really kind of dominated from start to finish. The score didn't reflect that for the first part of the game, but in reality, there was just not a ton for Houston to cheer for on Saturday night, which for Frog fans is really nice and comforting.
So in addition to kind of being a lackadaisical, we'll call it, atmosphere down in Houston, like you said, there were some good things to take away if you were a TCU fan. What was kind of you were down at the game, you were in Houston. What is the number one thing that you took from this conference opener for TCU, game 3 of the season?
I thought it was the best game TCU's played to date, which is nice to take a step in the right direction when you hit conference play. I don't know. Like you said, I was expecting a little bit more from Houston as a football team. Donovan Smith looked terrible throwing the ball on Saturday night for Houston. Part of that was, though, because TCU actually got a little bit of defensive pressure at times. They rushed 4 and 5, far more than they had in the prior 2 games of the season. And so, I think the biggest takeaway for me was the fact that TCU won a game in conference play by 23 points. They only won 2 conference games by 14 points or more last season. And so to get started in conference play 1-0 and to win like they did, it's the second game in a row that they haven't allowed the opposing team to score a touchdown on offense. So, just a lot of good positive takeaways from Saturday night's game for sure.
Yeah, I think, for me, it was just the effort level looked a lot different. I think one thing Sonny Dykes talked about really throughout the first 2 games was that this was not a level of execution effort that TCU could get away with and expect to win many games. And they looked like they were still, I don't know if it was in a hangover from last season or just so many new guys and new faces in important places, but they just didn't seem to be kind of playing at full tilt. And I think for the most part, Saturday night in Houston, this looked like a team that was playing hard almost every single snap, both on defense and offense. And it was also really nice in that vein to see some guys that have struggled this season step up and make some big plays. Savion Williams had a huge touchdown catch on just an absolute dime from Chandler Morris. Johnny Hodges, who's really struggled through the first 2 games, had a couple of sacks. Bug Clark had an interception, got beat for a big pass play on 3rd and long too.
True.
But but you started to see some of those guys that we've been expecting big things from step up and be playmakers, which was something I think was really nice to see. And like you said, just the defensive pressure they were able to get on Donovan Smith, who is not a good passing quarterback, but when a guy's got legs like that, to be able to kind of contain him, keep him in the pocket, and then knock him down, which they did a lot of, I thought was a really positive thing overall.
Yeah, that's where I think you can really take some positive things away from this game as I try to pull up the stats from last night as I talk. And I think that too, you mentioned Bud Clark getting burned on a deep pass, but he also had his interception, right? You have Zach Marchesselli get his first career interception as
Yeah, which
well,
was
which was
awesome.
really fun to see. You had guys like Shad Banks making plays late in the fourth quarter. Part of that contained too, right? That you were talking about with keeping Donovan Smith from really being able to run a ton. There was that moment in the fourth where I think it was like 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7. Frogs brought pressure. They got to Donovan Smith. He manages to work his way out of the pocket and start to run. And there's Shad Banks reading the play perfectly well from that middle linebacker spot. He gets over, he tackles Smith for a loss, actually for a sack. And so a lot of good plays from guys that we've wanted to see more from in the first few weeks. And then still, though, I think it was the perfect kind of way to open up conference play because Sonny Dykes, after the game, still mentioned to the team that, there's still a lot of mistakes to fix. They've still got a lot of growing to do. But hey, we're looking good week 1 of conference play. Now we have something to build on. So I think it was a little bit of best of both worlds because the coaching staff still has a lot to fix, and so the guys are still going to be maybe motivated to improve off of this one.
Well, I think it's really great too for the secondary that we've kind of maligned here over the first 2 weeks to play well. And again, not against a great passing quarterback, but we talked about Bud Clark. That 53-yard reception was the only reception that he allowed. You saw Josh Newton struggled a little bit. He was targeted 5 times. He gave up 4 completions. But for the most part, none of those went for massive plays. But I think overall that secondary looked a little bit more complete. Mark Perry was great in run support and against a running quarterback. I think that's super important. And TCU as a whole was really, really good on 3rd and 4th down against the Cougars on Saturday night. They were just 4 for 15 on 3rd down. They were 0 for 4 on 4th down. And, we'll get to the flip side of that, and TCU struggling in that department. But defensively, they got the Cougars off the field consistently and pretty decisively. And like you said, for the second straight game, did not allow an offensive touchdown. We'll talk about where those touchdowns are being scored here a little bit later in the podcast because that's another level of concern. But overall, that defense, also they had 14 quarterback hurries and 6 total sacks on the night. I mean, I can't remember the last time TCU had 6 sacks in a game against a Power 5 opponent. It's certainly been a while. So those are encouraging things. I like the adjustments that Joe Gillespie said, like you said, sending in more guys at the quarterback, using more blitzes, being a little bit more creative. And it kind of makes you wonder, were they holding back until they got to conference play to kind of let some of those wrinkles out? And we can discuss whether that was a good idea or not against Colorado, but seeing what the Buffaloes are doing, that loss is looking a little bit less devastating than it did, 2-3 weeks ago too.
Yeah, I think week 1, you don't know what you're going to get from that Colorado offense. And we mentioned this right afterwards, too. That was a very kind of plain, straightforward game plan that TCU presented against the Buffs. And the fact that they didn't make any adjustments in the second half, I think, is probably the biggest criticism I still have about that game. But in reality, I think that they expected the game plan that they showed on the field to be enough to beat Colorado. And realistically, even in spite of how poorly the defense played, it should have been enough. You had the 2 red zone turnovers, you had the missed field goal. There were opportunities to still win that football game. Andrew Coker actually said earlier this week before the Houston game, he's like, the offense had the ball last in that Colorado game. We let the team down because we didn't go down the field and score. We had the ball last. And there's something to that. I think, you can also talk about, some of the other things that happened in that game. But I think what Coker was indicating there is still something we saw a little bit from in this game against Houston, where Melissa, like if I told you, hey, the Frogs are going to put up 562 yards of offense, Chandler's going to throw for 300 yards, team's going to run for 250 yards, you'd think that they won this game like 50-10.
Yeah, right.
Like that. But they only scored 36 points. And so there's still, I think, a little bit of a concern with how inefficient this offense can be at times, especially in the red zone and on third down.
And I completely, totally agree with that. And I think that's kind of still one of the biggest issues that we're looking at. And we were kind of talking about this last night in the group chat is it's really hard to sit there and to nitpick offense that has put up this many yards and this many points now in 3 consecutive games, but it still doesn't feel like I guess it's the when the points matter, right? When the yards
Mm-hmm.
matter, when the conversions matter. And, like we said, TCU really struggled on third down last night. Once again, I want to double check the stat before I just, go out and say it. They were just 6 for 15 on third down. They were 2 for 3 on fourth down, which you like to see that aggressiveness. But as our friend Parker pointed out, TCU is currently ranked 43rd in the country on third down, not terrible, but 111th in red zone scoring. And that to me is a massive, massive concern for this team going forward. One thing we know when you get into the Big 12 and you start playing those teams that are a little bit more talented and a little bit more efficient, if you can't capitalize on your red zone scoring opportunities, then you're going to be in big trouble. And it doesn't matter how many points you put up and how many yards you put up between the 20s. If you can't
Mm-hmm.
get those final 20 yards, you're going to be in deep trouble. And I think that that's something that we've all kind of seen is they're making some big plays against lesser competition, and against Colorado's defense is very, very bad. We continued to see that. We saw that last Saturday night as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
So they're able to kind of bust those big plays, but when they need to get those hard yards in the compressed area of the field, it's, I don't know if you think it's a combination of play calling, if it's talent, if it's, what do you see going on there that's preventing TCU from being able to turn opportunities into touchdowns?
I think it's kind of a triple threat issue. The first being that there are definitely some times where the play calling isn't, in my opinion, where it should be, and they're doing some things in odd situations that are putting them behind the chains, that putting them off schedule is how Sonny Dykes talked about it after the game against Houston. Um, so that's one situation. There was a 16 play drive for TCU on Saturday night that did not result in points,
Hmm.
right? And part of the reason for that was they had a 1st and 10 opportunity, ball in Houston territory, and they run a reverse to a tight end. And Jack Besh does everything he can to try and do something and ends up losing 13 yards on the
Yeah.
play, right? And so you're taking a guy who's like a hybrid tight end, you're handing the ball, you're starting him 6-7 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Houston didn't bite on the fake at all. And now you've taken a long drive and you've put yourself really far behind the chains. So there's a play calling thing there. There's a little bit of an execution thing there, and then there's also a penalties situation
Yes.
brewing
Yeah.
because the offensive line had a couple penalties. There was a crackback block on Jalen Robinson that put them behind the chains. I think they had 4 15-yard penalties on Saturday night. That's something that has to get cleaned up as well.
Well, and I think that's one thing that we saw last year is this team really avoided those devastating penalties for the most part, especially from the offensive line. We've seen a ton of false starts, and now we're seeing some of those 15-yarders creep up as
Mm-hmm.
well. I want to talk about that Jack Besh play because we saw it early in the game, and it was semi-effective. I can't remember how many yards it picked up, but it got positive yardage,
A handful,
right?
like 7, I think.
Yeah, so it was a nice play. It was a nice wrinkle. You're showing a defense something they haven't seen. And I can say this now because I'm a football coach. What a very successful one recently, not at all. But what really bothers me about that is that you've shown a wrinkle. You've got the defense seeing something. Don't run that same play. Use that to set something up. If
Right.
they had run that same action and then used it to set up, something else, something play action or, a reverse or something, I think it could have been really clever and creative. When you go back to the well of something that was moderately effective, you're just kind of asking for trouble because now the defense has seen that they were clearly prepared for it and a potential, whatever else you would have run in that, for potential positive yards becomes a massive loss, put you behind the sticks. And now you're relying on special teams, which we'll talk about a little bit
Yeah.
later, but has been a struggle. It's had some of the brightest moments for TCU, and then also some of the most oh no, what is happening moments.
Yeah, it has, and like you said, we'll get into that in a moment. That 16-yard drive or that 16 play drive, pardon me, ended with a 50-yard field goal attempt. So
Yeah,
it's right.
that's
So like
insane.
you're chipping away, and you're eating a ton of clock, which is nice when you're up. But that still has to result in at least a better field goal attempt than a 50-yarder. And that
Yes.
that Besh play really set them behind the chains in a difficult way. Another thing that I wanted to bring up about third downs, though, they were 6 of 15 from third down on Saturday night. They were 5 of 5 on third down conversions when Chandler ran the ball on third down.
I saw your tweet about this. I'm
So
glad you, I'm glad you
I
brought this
was
up.
Brian Estridge. Shout out to Brian. He tweeted about this in his game notes on Sunday morning, and I was really intrigued. So when I went back and watched the game today, I looked for it, and like you said, I clipped all 5 of his third down runs, and I stitched them together, and I threw them up on Twitter. They're on the Frogs Insider YouTube page as well. I'll publish that link in just a second. But outside of Chandler Morris running it on third down, TCU was 1 of 10 on third down. Right. And
That's
some of that,
concerning.
and some of that was, okay, well, we're obviously going to go for it on fourth down. So if it's 3rd and 5, as long as we get 2 or 3 yards, we're fine. And like you said, they were 2 of 4 on fourth down conversions. So there's a little bit of gamesmanship there. The numbers don't maybe fully reflect what they were trying to do strategically on
Sure.
offense, but still 1 of 10 on third down conversions is not great. They're 20 of 44 on third down conversions this season so far.
Oof.
And that's not a terrible, that's 48, 47% isn't awful on third down. But I actually broke it down on Horn Frog Blitz today. 3rd and 3 or less, 3rd and 4 to 6, and 3rd and 7 or longer to see, how often they were in each of these situations and what their conversions were on them. So they're 9 of 15 on 3rd and 3 or less this season, which is pretty good, right? And some of those they went for it on like a 4th and 1 and still got a first down. So, you think about it that way. They're 2 of 7 on 3rd and 4 to 6. So not a great conversion rate on 3rd and medium. They're 10 of 22 on 3rd and 7 or longer. They've had 22 instances through 3 games this year where they've been in 3rd and long. And that's kind of what Sonny Dykes was getting at in his post game on Saturday night was we're finding ourselves in 3rd and long far too often, and nobody's good in 3rd and long. Now, TCU's 10 of 22, which isn't terrible. 4 of those 3rd and long conversions are Chandler running the football, and 3 of those came against Houston. The other one was his touchdown run against Colorado. And so, there's not a ton going for TCU in 3rd and long situations other than Morris running the football. And it goes back to the efficiency conversation and the stats that you were talking about earlier, Melissa. This team has to find a way to get into better situations late in later downs, or when they get into the meat of their schedule, especially that November slate. They're going to have a lot of challenges putting points up on the board because they're going to see a lot of drives stall out.
Yeah, and I think that is like it's kind of the double-edged sword too, and that's basically what you're saying is that you've got a guy who, we were screaming to run the ball more in week 1, but that also has a pretty significant injury history. And now you're relying on him as your primary modus operandus on 3rd and long to be the one that can get you yards, especially when you have all of this talent at wide receiver and you have this supposedly super creative passing game. You don't want to have to fall back on kind of, I mean, and listen, he made great reads on all of those runs, right? Like he did the right thing. He saw the coverage. He saw the opening. He knew he was going to have those lanes. Like that's what you want him to be able to do. But like you said, Sonny said too, you don't want to be put in the position where that's what you're relying on when you get because, a more athletic defense at Texas, at Kansas State, I mean, we've seen some of these teams put up pretty impressive performances. It's not going to be quite that simple, quite that easy down the line. I do want to talk about another running back who's making things look, or a running back who's making running look really easy, and that's Imani Bailey.
Yes.
You were a big proponent of this guy was going to be a star. You talked about how much he'd stood out all through fall camp. You've been on the Imani Bailey bus. I think we all kind of loved what we saw from him a season ago, but we're worried with a larger workload, how that would look. He's as good as advertised, if not better, especially playing behind a line that, like I said, has not been super, hasn't been bad. It's probably been better than we expected, but hasn't been super duper consistent. Is constantly putting TC behind the chains. He was awesome once again last night. When he gets in space, he is so hard to bring down, but I think it was on a 3rd and medium where he made a cut that sent a Houston defender sprawling to pick up a first down. I guess maybe that was the one conversion that TCU had, or maybe it was a second medium. What he is doing for TCU's offense and how consistently he's able to pick up big chunks of yardage, he's been really, really impressive. And it's kind of a shame that he's not getting more attention this season. He's arguably one of the top two backs in the Big 12 at the very least at this point.
He's up there. He's up there for sure. He almost didn't play on Saturday night because he's got a little bit of a sprained ankle, and I couldn't fathom what this offensive effort would have looked like without Amani Bailey, because he's just got a different level of burst from every other running back on the roster. Trey Sanders has had a couple really good runs through the first three games. He had another nice touchdown run on Saturday night, but he just doesn't hit holes the same way that Amani Bailey does. Amani runs angry. His feet hit the ground like he's pissed at it, right? And like he's taking hard. He's hitting cuts. He's putting his foot in the ground. He's making decisions quickly. And there were a couple moments where he could have probably broken a long one, but to their credit, the Houston safeties did a pretty good job of getting him to the ground. I asked Chandler about him on Saturday night, and Chandler kind of lit up. Chandler's doing this thing this season where every time he talks to the media, he's trying to be serious and well-spoken and like professional leader vibes, right? Like he's trying to like lean into this QB1 kind of thing. And he's growing. He's doing a good job. Then, I asked him about Amani Bailey, and he said, he kind of lit up. He smiles. He goes, "Nine's just different." He's like, he does so much for our offense. He's such a hard runner. You almost don't realize too, he caught 3 passes for 23 yards on Saturday night as well. So, he brings so many different things to this TCU offense. He's got to learn to block a little bit better.
Yeah.
I said it on the midweek podcast. If there's a running back on this roster that's willing to step up and block, they will be the number 2 running back behind Amani Bailey, just in that Amari DiMercato role. I promise you.
Yeah.
Like Trent Battle, if you're listening to this, brother, you had one really good block on a zone read. Keep that up. But, Amani does so much for this offense. And it's really, really nice to see, because we were asking those big questions prior to the season about, they lose Kendre Miller, they lose Amari DiMercato. Is this probably one of the thinner groups on the roster? And it still might be. But it's good to know that the top end talent seems to be not fully replacing the production from last year, but doing enough to keep this offense balanced.
You have a special player once again. Like, you don't have a Kendre Miller, but you've got a pretty special player. Talking about how important Amani Bailey is to this offense, though, he was on the field for 29 snaps yesterday. He had 23 rushing attempts and 3 catches. Yeah. So that basically means that if you're an opposing defense, if Amani Bailey is on the field, expect him to get the ball. And I guess that also speaks to the negative of he's not doing a great job pass blocking, or he'd probably be on the field a lot more too. So
yes, and they were up 3 touchdowns there for most of the second half. So you're just running the ball a little bit more.
Yeah, but he's, I mean, if you look at his at Colorado, he's on the field for 15 snaps. He's got 14 rushing attempts. Nichols, he's on the field for 21 snaps. He's got 19 rushing attempts. Houston, 23 and 29 with 3 receptions. Like, basically, like, it's a kind of a giveaway. If he's in the backfield, he's probably running the ball. So, which is kind of a crazy thing to look at this point in the season. But he's been really, really good. He's averaging over 6 yards a carry. I had his first rushing touchdown of the season on Saturday night, which is a little bit of a surprising stat. But he really has not necessarily carried this team, but is been, I think, arguably the most important player on TCU's offense so far. That being said, I think we do have to kind of give Chandler his flowers here a little bit. He's starting to kind of grow into the role. And on Saturday night in Houston, I think he displayed the accuracy that was the reason he won the job a year ago. And the thing that we've kind of been promised about him, he threw a couple of deep balls, which has been his biggest struggle in the first, early goings of the season. But he put a couple just spot on, right on the money, and did some really, really nice things in the passing game that I think are very encouraging going forward.
That pass to the 2 touchdown passes down the left sideline, one to Warren Thompson and the second one to Savion Williams, were just as good of balls I've seen him throw. Yeah. He dropped that Savion pass into a bucket, which was just perfect and really fun to see, especially because Savion was on the other end of that, and they've been wanting to get him going. We've been hoping that he would get going a little bit more. And the thing with Chandler too, right? Like, 24, 37, 65% completion percentage for 314 yards, 2 touchdowns. Did throw a pick, right? So there's some stuff there. He had a fumble, he got hit in the backfield, and fumbled the ball. So two more turnovers from him, and he brought those up in post game about ball security and needing to do a better job. But I think to this point, close to 900 passing yards, 6 passing touchdowns, a couple rushing touchdowns as well. He's on pace, by the way, Melissa, for more rushing yards than Max Duggan ever had in a single season.
Wow. That would
Right.
be
Which
shocking,
is
wouldn't it?
crazy, right?
Yeah.
580 something is what he's on pace for right now. I think Max's best career was like 560. So
Hmm.
he's doing it with his feet. He's gaining more confidence there. He's throwing the ball well right now. You got to limit those turnovers a little bit
Yeah.
more, but uh, I don't want to hear any of the this is Chandler struggling. That's the reason the offense is struggling at this point, because I think he's pretty much done outside of the turnovers everything you'd hoped he would be able to do at this point.
Yeah, he hit 10 different receivers. He had 5 completions over 20 yards last night, or Saturday night. So he did, yeah. I mean, he's finding his guys. He hit JP Richardson 6 times. So JP Richardson, once again, for 2 out of 3 games, has been the leading receiver. He's got a great chemistry with Warren Thompson. I mean, he had only that one catch, but like you said, it was just a beautiful read. And I think that's the other thing too, is he's getting now to his second and third and fourth reads with a little bit more confidence. And I think that was the thing that was concerning, especially in the Colorado game, is it kind of was like a one read and he's letting it go. Now he's because he's getting better pass protection. I think that's part of it as well. But he's finding different guys, he's getting different guys involved in the offense. He's getting a chemistry, learning what these guys like to do, where they're going to be open, how they're going to run their routes. And as you start conference play, or with a little side swipe at the iron skillet next week, but you want to see this offense starting to click from a player perspective. And I think as that happens, that'll help make Kendall Bryle's job a little bit easier too, as far as knowing what to call, what Chandler's comfortable with, what the receivers are comfortable with in those important spots. And hopefully we see the play calling and the level of play kind of rise up together, so that this is a fully functioning operating system before you get into those more challenging games down the line.
Yeah, and we've still got to see better offensive line play too.
Yeah.
They did okay again on Saturday, but there's still a lot that they've got to clean up. Some pre-snap stuff, some holding penalties, guys not getting the blocks on time, and there were 2 or 3 times where the offense dialed up a pretty timely screen that could have gained a lot of yards, but then you've got offensive linemen downfield that just aren't getting to the guys they're supposed to block, and so the tackle happens, and a potential 25-30 yard gain turns into an 8 to 10 yard gain. And so they've got to clean up some of the stuff on the offensive line. A couple guys got banged up, right? Brandon Coleman, they didn't know if he was even going to play. He kind of gutted it out, looked like he was limping a good amount of the time on Saturday night. Andrew Coker went down and came out of the game a couple different times. John Lands was banged up. Willis Patrick was limping after the game. And so, 4 out of your 5 offensive lineman starters came away from that game a little bit beat up. You did see Ben Taylor Whitfield, a true freshman, play a little left tackle and a little left guard on Saturday night, which was nice to see. I didn't fully expect him to be the guy that they would go to on that left side if they were replacing someone. I thought it would be Colton Deary at guard, or maybe even Brockermeyer at tackle. But to have a true freshman who they trust enough to roll out there if Coker or Coleman goes down, I don't know exactly what that says about this offensive line depth quite yet.
Well, I think I think Brockermeyer got a couple of snaps. I could be wrong,
Did
but
he?
I thought I saw, I
Okay.
think he might, I'm not 100% sure, but it was in garbage time down the.
I'll have to go check PFF's
Yeah, I
snap
could be wrong on that. Let's talk about Colton Deary, because for a long period of time, we all kind of assumed he was going to end up being the starting center. And now, like I said, he's not even getting reps in the 2 deep. Is this a guy that you think could still be impactful on this offensive line if the injuries start kind of mounting up and the bumps and bruises become an issue for this team?
I don't see why not. But I think we all got fooled a little bit in fall camp because John Lands was out with an injury. And so we saw a lot of Colton at center. We saw a little bit of Willis Patrick at center. Ezra Dotson Oteode played a little center as well. And they went to Lands when he came back from an injury, despite not getting as many snaps as you would have hoped for in fall camp. And he's been fine at center, right? Like he hasn't really caused any problems, which is kind of what you want from your offensive linemen, right? Like it just don't be
Yeah,
noticed
don't mess up. Yeah,
and don't screw up because that's when everybody notices you. And I wonder if, Colton really truly is just the backup center right now.
yeah,
Right. And so if you've got kind of your two deep and you think, okay, well, if Colton's going to be your backup right guard, then he's only going to go in if Patrick goes down. If he's going to be your backup center, he's only going to go in if Lance goes down. We saw Taylor Whitfield go bounce between left guard and left tackle on Saturday night, though. So I don't know how static that depth chart is really at this point.
yeah,
But the reality is that Colton Deary is only a sophomore. He did start 10 games for Maryland last
mm,
year, but there's an opportunity to really just kind of grow and develop a kid instead of throwing him into the fire. If Lands is doing a fine job, if Patrick's
yeah.
doing a fine job at right guard, then you're not gonna force a change just to see if a guy can do better for you. He's kind of got to go out there and earn it and practice every day. And right now it just feels like Colton's pretty solidly on that two deep, and that's about it.
Yeah. So I'm looking at PFF and Brockmeyer did not get any reps here. So
Okay.
that was incorrect. A little bit concerning. Andrew Coker had a 61 pass grade. Brandon Coleman had a 64. Those are your two veterans, your true returning guys. Like you want to see better performance. But Willis Patrick was over 87, John Lands at 81, Michael Nichols at 80. So there's some encouraging signs. And again, that's not the best pass rush that TCU is going to see, the best, run defensive group that TCU is going to see. But you like seeing those guys kind of perform at a high level. I think we all knew Willis Patrick had a chance to be really, really good. And he's delivered for the most part. But, Coleman and Coker getting banged up certainly could have impacted their overall performance. But, you want those guys to be kind of your two best offensive linemen in conference play. And they're going to have to step up, I think, if they're going to kind of hold that banner.
I fully agree. They haven't played as well as they need to play for this team to be successful consistently on offense. They're going to see some defensive fronts in Texas and Kansas State, and even Oklahoma at this point
Yeah.
has done a really good job up front defensively. Iowa State's not going to be an easy out on the defensive side of the ball, and they've got some challenges ahead. And even SMU played really well defensively against an Oklahoma team that they faced up in Norman a couple weeks ago. Um, the competition steps up pretty quickly after this Houston game, and if the line can't block consistently and protect Chandler, there's a higher risk of injury, and there's obviously a higher risk of losing more football games because you're not putting points on the board.
Before we get into another area where TCU has a veteran that's not really performing up to the level that we expect, we want to talk about something that does consistently perform above and beyond
Nice.
the level that we expect. And that is our friends at Hell's Half Acre Stadium Goods. This is a brand created with Horned Frog fans in mind. Each item sold directly impacts TCU student athletes through their NIL and different partnerships that they have with Horned Frog athletes, which is really cool. Check out all their TCU gear, polo shirts, headwear, home goods. They've got everything to get you ready for game day. I know we've seen a lot of those Hell's Half Acre polos, football polos lying around. I think they've got some new stuff dropping too in the next couple weeks. They also have a great Hell's Half Acre lager in partnership with I just blanked. I just helped me
What
out on the.
brewery?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, what brewery? Yes. So Fort Brewery, which we're super excited about. Like I said, all of their great stuff. They're a great sponsor, a great partner with us. We love a Hell's Half Acre. Everything they produce is super high quality. And it's been really fun to see their brand kind of popping up around the stadium and even among the TCU contingent that traveled down to Houston, which was a pretty significant number Saturday night, which was awesome.
Yeah, love Hell's Half Acre. Love all the things they're doing. They've got some other cool stuff kind of in the hopper that they're getting ready to announce here too. So super excited to see where Steven takes this company from here because he's got a lot of stuff going right now.
Who has a lot of stuff going, but not all of it's good is TCU special teams,
Yeah.
Jamie. We've seen the highest of highs and the lowest of lows out of the third position group on this roster. And Griffin Kell had a tough night Saturday. And so did the special teams kick coverage team, which gave up a 98-yard kick return to Matthew Golden. How concerned are we that Griffin Kell missed a couple of kicks? And when we see, how confident should we be when we've seen him nail a 57-yarder already this year?
Look, he was 3 of 5. The field goals that he missed were a 50-yarder and a 60-yarder. I'm not going to blame a guy for missing a 60-yard field goal. Like,
I'd
I
say that to Kansas State though.
sure, right? Yeah, I mean, Mizzou what hit a 61 yarder to win that game and walk it off or whatever.
Yeah.
So nice, good for you. Kell's 60-yard attempt fell a little short. This was right before halftime, and Houston put a guy under the goalposts. He caught it and returned it and had a convoy, Melissa.
Yeah.
Had a
That
convoy.
was scary.
If DJ Rogers doesn't run that guy down from behind,
Yeah.
which is impressive for a big dude like Rogers, that might be a touchdown going into halftime for Houston. And we're talking about a totally different um, maybe a totally different football game altogether. After that, TCU was not good tackling either on special teams. You know, they gave up the 98-yard kickoff return touchdown to Matthew Golden, who was a TCU commit. No, I don't
Hmm.
know if he was committed to TCU, but it was down to Houston to TCU,
he was committed, I thought, for a
and
while,
he
but I could be
flipped to
wrong.
Houston.
Yeah.
Okay, well, he absolutely embarrassed a couple TCU defenders on a kickoff. They had him wrapped up. They kind of bounced off of each other, grabbed at his legs again, and he took off from there. And you can argue about, I saw this on Twitter, you can argue about whether or not Griffin Kell was blocked in the back on the play. That's less relevant to me.
Yeah.
He's probably not going to get the angle on Matthew
Yeah.
Golden,
I don't
first
think
of
he's
all.
pulling down Matthew Golden from behind. It's not
And
happening.
and second of all, you already had him wrapped up 20 yards prior to that penalty happening, and you couldn't get him to the ground. So that tackling was poor on that play. They had another kickoff that got returned out near midfield because they missed a couple tackles. We talked about the return on the kick on the missed field goal that almost gave up points right before halftime. This is a special teams unit that had looked really, really good through 2 weeks. And now that's the thing that we're probably asking as many questions about as the other two units because of a poor performance. And if it's not one thing, it's another for this team through 3 games, but they've got to start sorting some of this stuff out.
Yeah, I mean, to be 2-1 with all of the nits we are picking, and deservedly so. I mean, there's certainly room for criticism on this team, but to be 2-1, to be 1-0 in Big 12 play, and like you said, for Sonny Dykes to be able to come in and say, "Hey, we won, and we won significantly, but we are far from a ride. We're far from a complete product." I mean, that's kind of what you want to be. Now you get, I mean, like Colorado has done what Colorado has done, but that's such a unique scenario. Now you get what's, arguably the toughest test of the season so far with an SMU team that not only has looked pretty impressive through the first part of the season. I mean, they kind of corralled Oklahoma in a way nobody else has, even though Oklahoma hasn't played anybody else of like with a heartbeat or a pulse, but they look good against Oklahoma. They've looked impressive in their other 2 games, and they obviously have a lot of reason to be super, super fired up for this one. I think going into this weekend's battle for the Iron Skillet, if TCU can't get juiced for this one and doesn't kind of lock in some of these things that we've brought up, red zone scoring, special teams play, all of those things, if they aren't kind of playing at or near their peak by Saturday, it's going to be a long day for TCU fans, and there'll be a lot of celebrating across the Metroplex from those wearing red and blue for SMU.
Yeah, I got some concerns about this one, especially with TCU secondary. I mentioned it already. Donovan Smith is just not a good passing quarterback.
Yeah.
I think you said it as well, and that is not the
Justin
case.
Stone is, yeah.
That is not the case for this SMU offense coming in on Saturday morning. And so they've got to figure some stuff out. I think the promising things that you can lean on as a TCU fan right now are the fact that they got some really good pressure on Donovan Smith and got him out of a rhythm throwing the football early.
Yeah.
Houston also dropped a handful of passes that had they held on to the ball, Houston would have probably put a lot more points on the board.
Yeah.
So there were still opportunities that Houston just didn't take advantage of that SMU will likely take advantage of on Saturday. So, I think this is definitely, I know this isn't the SMU preview or anything, but I think this is going to be a much higher scoring game, similar to kind of the Colorado game in week 1 when SMU comes to town, just because their offense is much better than Houston's. And I think that TCU's offense still is moving in the right direction and is going to be able to put points on the board as well.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting because, like I said, both these teams are going to be able to move the ball. It's going to be kind of a which defense steps up. And TCU has really struggled with SMU defensively, being able to stop the Mustangs the last several years. And
Mhm.
so but this is also a unit, a team that, Joe Gillespie has got a lot of familiarity with, even though obviously it's a new coaching staff because he's part of the old coaching staff over at TCU now. So I'm certainly concerned. And I think the extra motivation that the Mustangs have in this one with the skillet going on pause and all the other things happening, make it a difficult one to go into super confidently. It's an 11 a.m. kickoff. It's going to be hot. It's going to be probably pretty muggy. It's kind of setting up to be a stressful 3.5 hours or so for TCU fans, I have a feeling.
Yeah, I think so too. But at the same time, there's a track record of really good SMU programs coming into Fort Worth and
Yeah.
losing football games too. So I'm excited that the Skillet, in its third to last iteration, is gearing up to be a competitive game. And obviously SMU thinks they're in the third best conference in the country now,
Yeah.
having joined the ACC. Melissa, I
Yeah,
made this.
lining up with Stanford, who just lost to Sac State. So yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, it's good.
the Stanford who hired Sac State's coach
Yeah, and
and
then
then lost to Sac
lost to
State,
Sac
right?
State. Yeah,
Um, I I made this joke to Mike Craven and Jeremy Clark in the press box on Saturday night, but I just think it's the SMU going to the ACC move reminds me so much of all of those wealthy like celebrity parents who were paying for their kids to get their SAT scores high
yeah,
enough to like get into USC and stuff.
yep.
Like that is
Photoshopping
absolutely
their daughters and crew, and yeah,
that is the how SMU got into a Power Five conference. They did it the most. Hey, we're just super rich. We're gonna pay as
mm-hmm.
much money as it takes to get in here, even though we haven't earned it an ounce of it on the field. Um, and it is my hope that SMU, uh, you know, spends all of that money and has all of that hope, and then Saturday morning comes and uh, you know, two hundred
Get
million
smoked.
dollar $200 million doesn't help you on the football
Yeah,
field. So
yep,
um, we'll see. We'll see. SMU takes a lot of pride in how much money they have. Um, and that is certainly a thing that you can have, I suppose.
yeah.
But
Good for them. Happy for
yeah,
them. They still play in a Cracker Jack Stadium.
they do. And part of this move to the ACC is, oh cool, we're going to get Notre Dame in Dallas, but it's probably going to be a Jerry World. Oh cool, we're going to be able to play North Carolina, but it's probably for a home game, but it's, oh wait, no, it's going to be at NRG down in Houston, right?
Yeah.
So, oh cool, we're not going to pay you and we're not going to play on your campus. I mean, how much do you have to debase yourself if you're SMU just to like be able to put the ACC patch on your jerseys? I mean, it's a little ridiculous.
And they're super willing to do it. So I guess great for them in this moment. Hey, we're laughing at SMU. Do you want to laugh at some Big 12 teams too?
Yes, please. Hey,
Yeah.
first of all, everybody that's listening to this episode right now, for no other reason than what I'm about to say, if you doubted me, go like this podcast and leave a 5-star review. If you're a person on Twitter that ridiculed me for taking the under on Oklahoma State's win
Huh.
total this year, because they have such a soft candy schedule and they lost by 4 touchdowns to South Alabama on Saturday.
Oof.
Are you kidding me?
I'm trying to remember if I took the under too. I think you kept
You took
records of
the
this.
over. I
Oh, I
tweeted
took
out a
the over.
graphic.
That's
I tweeted out a
so
graphic.
bad.
People on Twitter took the over. You took the over, which
This
we had
is,
we like hashed it out on the podcast. So you made a compelling
yeah,
argument.
I
But
have regrets.
where show me five because it's 6.5. Show me 5 more wins on that
Yeah,
schedule.
there is absolutely no chance. You can't lose like that to South Alabama and expect to make a bowl game. Period. Like you don't even deserve. Like why do you even keep playing? Like the Oklahoma State fans aren't even complaining because they're so bad. They've just had to like they're in hibernation or they're in their tornado shelters and they're just hunkering down till next season and hoping that Mike Gundy decides to retire or something.
Here's how bad Oklahoma State's down right now. They're playing Iowa State this weekend.
Huh?
Iowa State's a 4.5 point favorite.
That's rough. That's
That's
rough. Like when you are that much of a dog to a team that's
just
arguably
lost to
just
Ohio.
yeah, it's a things are tough in Stillwater. And listen, Stillwater's a great little college town. I like some of the Oklahoma State fans I know. There's some good people out there, but oof. Like, how do you fall that hard that fast? This is going to give TCU fans some PTSD to the year they let Gary go, because I have a feeling we're in for an ugly divorce with Mike Gundy here.
It's not looking good.
And he's playing his kid. Like, that's the other part, is he's playing his kid at quarterback.
Some of the
And they
time.
look, yeah, some of the time, and they look this bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no escaping this. This is gonna be terrible. Obviously, I think Oklahoma State is the worst loss of the week, but probably not the most heartbreaking. That would belong to our friends at Kansas State,
Yes.
who lost the border war in a way you never see college games end, with a 61-yard walk-off field goal, like we mentioned earlier, after Eli Drinkwitz completely and totally mismanaged a 2-minute drive so horrifically, took his time out at the worst possible time, thought they had a timeout before the field goal, but didn't. And so the play clock runs out. They move 5 yards back, and then they bring out this absolute unit of a kicker, Mevis, and he just friggin' nails it from 61. What the heck?
It would have been good from 65 or 66. Like
It would have been good from the other end zone.
like
Like, that
he
thing.
he absolutely crushed that football. And so I'm driving to Houston while this game is happening, and I'm trying to, like, I have it on my phone, so I'm listening to it. I'm listening to the TV broadcast though, so there's like,
I've done that. Yeah.
it's miserable trying to do that because you lose so. This is, if you ever want a better appreciation for how good radio broadcasters are at their job, shout out Brian Estridge for the second time on
Yes.
this episode.
And Landry Burdine, who's also absolutely killing it in
Yes,
his new
and
role.
Elvis on
Elvis,
the
who's
field
so
as
good on the
well.
sideline. Yeah.
Listen to a TV broadcast and see if you can even try to build half of a picture of what's happening in your brain. You don't realize how much you rely on the visual medium when you're listening to TV commentators and watching a football game at the same time. And so I'm like trying to like glance down at my phone and keep my eyes on the highway, and I just hear chaos. And then I hear, though, at the end, after they make that field goal, oh, there's a
Flag on the
flag.
field.
Oh, there's a flag. And I'm
Nope.
like, oh my gosh, was it a holding? Like, are they going to have to try a 71-yard field goal? Is this going to overtime? Is my pick of Kansas State to cover 5.5 still gonna survive some way? And then 30 seconds of silence on the TV broadcast, and then, oh no, I think it was just a kid's shirt. That's like,
Yeah.
that was all of the commentary we got around that chaotic ending to the game.
Yeah. It was
So annoying.
absolutely insane. And for all the amazingness of that kick going through, there's the opposite side of this, where Iowa State can't review a kick that is about as close as you can ever imagine between whether it did or did not cross on the inside of the uprights.
Mm-hmm.
It's called a missed kick. They can't review it for whatever reason that exists, and they lose to Ohio. But
10 to
even if
7.
even if that kick counts, like, you scored 7 offensive points against Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
You scored 7 points, period,
Yeah.
against Ohio. Like, that defense is still pretty solid. Like, that's the one thing we know. But how many times a day does Matt Campbell think about how much money he could have made if he had left Iowa State, and instead he is escorting players to Gamblers Anonymous meetings?
And he's getting yelled at by fans who traveled to Ohio for this game because it was at Ohio. And as the team's walking off the field afterwards, they had to like take this weird winding route to get back to their locker room. And so they were walking past this row of fans down like at field level. And an Iowa State fan is yelling at Matt Campbell, "You're on the hot seat now. You're on the hot seat now." And Matt Campbell turns around and starts shouting back at this guy, and has like football staffers and players like pushing him down the way, keeping him from trying to run over and get in this fan's face. Has there ever been a bigger bag fumble than Matt Campbell? Like,
I
honestly,
mean,
has
just,
there ever been a bigger bag fumble?
and that is why when you are at, and no offense to Iowa State, because you could say the same thing about TCU and a lot of other schools, a mid-tier FBS program, and the NFL comes calling, or a bigger, or Ohio State or Blue Blood comes calling, you go. You go, because you never know what can change and how quickly it can change. And Matt Campbell has got to have, like, maybe he should have an agent, he's because he has An agent and a special teams coach are the two things that have been
Look,
missing from his life. It's devastating.
and also don't just hold out for the dream job,
Yeah.
right? Because like obviously, if Ohio State had ever come calling, he would have jumped in a heartbeat. But you can get to Ohio State from somewhere other than Iowa State,
Yeah.
right? Like
Certainly from the NFL.
when Michigan State calls you to 2 years ago and wants to throw a bag at you, take it, right? If
Yeah.
you know, I mean,
Just
Wisconsin
don't.
was right there.
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't know any other Big Ten school.
Yeah.
Um,
Because they don't care
just
about offense there either. So like it would have been a great fit for him, like
mm-hmm.
he could have scored 7 points and won some ball games in the Big Ten probably.
take
It's just
yeah, take the under on
it's
Iowa State's win total too. Someone has to win this weekend, so that's nice for
yeah.
them and Oklahoma State. But
I can't imagine just the emotional whiplash Iowa State fans have gone through. I mean, I don't think anybody saw the precipice falling off this much.
I
Like,
mean, they were in the Big 12 championship 3 years ago.
yeah, and they've recruited well, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in 2 years they've completely become a non-entity in this conference.
It's
It's
brutal.
insane.
They might finish below Cincinnati, which
Woo. And Cincinnati just gets a woof. I think that's my show note. It's just woof. To lose in overtime to Miami of Ohio at home the week before you play Oklahoma in your Big 12 debut.
yeah.
That's just a woof.
Mm-hmm. I
Not
didn't
even a
watch this
growl.
game.
Me
I didn't
either.
even I didn't even pay attention to this game on
Me
like my
either.
sports app or anything.
Nope. I
I
have
just
no
saw the
regrets over
final
that
score
decision. Yeah.
and I was like, that team beat Pitt.
Yep.
My
Yep.
transitive win for Miami of Ohio over Pitt.
Yeah. Which
Congratulations.
doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But I will say, because I know how important this is to our friends at West Virginia, I am so glad West Virginia beat Pitt, especially with how
Mm-hmm.
much crying Phil Jerkovich was doing leading up to that game. I'm sure he got some more booze in Morgantown on Saturday night. And you know what? Welcome to college football, kids. So I think West Virginia is a great atmosphere. Love seeing them beat Pitt. I have no reason to like Pitt, so I am happy for my Mountaineer friends. A nice win for them. That does not look like a very good football team. Pitt just looks like a really, really bad football team. So we'll let them have the win. BYU with a really nice win over Arkansas. Again, probably not a world beater Arkansas team, but BYU is looked a lot more solid, I think, than maybe we thought they were maybe a team that could kind of go either way. They look like they're well prepared, they're well coached, and they play quality football. I don't know if they'll be a factor in the Big 12 race, but they're not going to be a bad team. They're going to be a hard out for everybody, including TCU, who has them for homecoming.
Yeah, the Razorback in me watched KJ Jefferson fumble the ball away late, and I just died a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, good for you, BYU.
Yeah,
Congratulations on that
it's
win.
good for the conference, we'll say. UCF has looked pretty impressive. I mean, again, they haven't really been challenged this season. They struggled a little bit at Boise, but I mean, Gus has them boys playing pretty well on offense, and they've got some talent there for sure.
Yeah, we'll be interested to see. I think I saw that John Reese Plumlee's out for a couple of weeks, and so if that's the case, they might hit some bumps in the road.
Yeah.
I don't have their schedule up to see who they play over the next couple of weeks, but if they can overcome losing him, I think that they'll be in pretty good shape come the bulk of conference play.
Their first test without him is going to be at Kansas State, so that probably won't go super well. And I'm sure Kansas State is feeling really, really good right now, so they won't be angry.
Yeah, coming off a loss, that's
yeah. Then they get Baylor at home, and then they get on the road at Kansas State, at Kansas. Kansas struggled with Nevada. Nevada's not very good, but they came away with the win. That's probably I don't think Kansas is going to blow anybody away this year, but going and winning, that's really all you can ask for. Oklahoma, they struggled a little bit with SMU, but that team is looking a lot more complete than they did a year ago. Dylan Gabriel has been really, really impressive so far this season.
Yeah, 3-0. You hang 60 plus on Tulsa. Like that's just taking care of business and moving on to the next one for them. And now they go to Cincinnati, so they're probably looking at 4-0. I want to talk about that Kansas game for a second too, because I was really interested in it. And you're right, they struggled more than they should have. And then I looked at their schedule and realized that they play BYU next week, right? And so okay, maybe they're looking ahead to their first Big 12 game of the season. Is this maybe a little bit of a look ahead opportunity there? But still, sitting at 3-0 is never a bad thing to be. But Baylor only beats an FCS team 30-7 in Long Island, Brooklyn.
Oof.
Or LIU Brooklyn. Is it Long? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's Long Island.
LIU, the Sharks.
Yes, the Sharks.
The Sharks. They
Bad.
this is probably Dave Aranda's last year, and that sucks
Yeah.
because I like Dave Aranda.
Unless he wants to come be a defense. I mean, not that I'm trying to, push
Well,
anybody
can
out,
we? All right, hang on.
but
Let's press pause here for a second because TCU's defense hasn't allowed a touchdown in 2 games.
yeah, okay, you're right, you're
There are
right, you're
some
right.
there are some things that they need to get cleaned up schematically. There's also a little bit of slow footedness in certain areas where you need to not be so slow. But Namdi Obiezor is looking like he's growing into that
Yeah,
role. I would love to see Shad Banks play a little bit more at middle linebacker because he is fast. Let's not talk about replacing Joe Gillespie until
you're right, you're right.
right, like we're not there. We're not even remotely close to there. And I'm fed up with people on Horn Frog Blitz because every game we're starting fire Joe Gillespie threads now. Like there were I locked one finally on Saturday night and got yelled at by a couple people. I've never seen someone lock a thread. Yeah, you have, first of all. And second of all, go use one of the other 8 that someone else started last week about firing Joe Gillespie. So
Yeah, there you go.
like
Plenty of options.
let's just pump the brakes here for a little bit because this is not going to be a perfect defense. We saw its deficiencies last season in a season where TCU won 13 games. Let's just maybe give it a little bit of time this year to let some of these guys who are starting for the first time or moving positions get their footing under them before we start talking about hiring Dave Aranda as our defensive coordinator. None of that rant was directed at
Fair, fair,
none
fair,
of that rant
fair.
was really directed at you. That was mostly directed at you, Melissa. That was mostly directed at you, the listener who
Yes,
has been complaining on
but fair
social
to
media.
direct some of it at me as well. That's fair. Joe's doing
Whatever.
a good job. They're getting better. The end.
I really like Joe Gillespie.
Baylor's
Anyways,
terrible. Baylor's awful.
Baylor's
Baylor
bad.
might be the worst team in the con. I don't know. Like the Baylor, Oklahoma State, Cincinnati race to the bottom is going to be fascinating to watch this
It's going to
year.
be a real challenge. It's going to be a real challenge. Saturday, October 21st, Baylor and Cincinnati play each other. Should we go to Cincinnati for that one? October 21st?
I mean, I'm kind of tempted.
Yeah.
Like yeah, it's somebody's got to win kind of game.
Who does
So,
TCU play that weekend? Let's see. October 21st.
isn't that
This is great
Kansas
for
State?
radio.
Is
That's
that
at
Kansas
Kansas
State?
State.
Yeah.
Easy dub for TCU. Let's go to Cincinnati
Okay.
Baylor
Let's go
instead.
to Cincinnati. I think traveling roadshow, Frogs Insider, where we go to games that aren't TCU games.
Well, we've got an empty week on the 28th, so we'll have to find a bottom of the barrel Big 12
Do,
game.
do you want to go to Colorado? I kind of want to go to a Colorado game. I'm not gonna lie.
I don't. I can't say that I have that desire. I'll be honest with you. I'll be
Uh,
honest with you.
should
Hey,
we talk about Texas before we go?
yeah, they struggled with Wyoming for 3 quarters and then pulled away. I mean,
Yeah,
they
it's a
did.
typical Alabama hangover, right?
You want to talk about an Alabama hangover?
Oh yeah, I watched a lot of that game, like because it was like watching a train like derail in slow motion.
Yes, I mean they were tied 3-3 with South Alabama, or with excuse me with South Florida into the fourth quarter.
Yeah,
I'm fairly certain.
they don't have a quarterback, and their offensive line is terrible.
This
I mean,
is
that's
when I asked the question last week about was this similar to Texas's win over Notre Dame a couple of years ago. This is the kind of thing that I was talking about. I have no idea how good Alabama is. I have no idea who they play next week. That they were so unbothered by even the thought of having to play real football against South Florida. Um, but when you go to South Florida and you only win 17-3, and you need 2 touchdowns in like the last 8 minutes of the game to make it 17-3, and you're Alabama, a Nick Saban coached Alabama, I don't know what's going on there anymore. I don't know what's going on there.
talk
Wyoming's got
about
a hell
guys that might have run their course at a school. Oof.
right, and also back to the Texas thing for a second. Shout out to Wyoming for a 17 play, 10-minute drive that ended in a field goal. Really proud of you guys. Really, really proud of you guys for that. Texas pulled away in the fourth quarter though and looked fine. They'll be fine. I just don't think that they were in it very, inspired on the
Yeah,
field that day, and that's fine
little
after a
yeah,
win
it's a
against
little
Alabama.
yeah. There's a little bit of a letdown, and I think that's perfectly acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Jamie, you know who never lets us down?
Who, Melissa?
Home Field Apparel. Do you want to tell us a little bit about our
Yes,
friends at Home Field Apparel?
I would love nothing more than to tell you about our friends at Home Field Apparel because with Home Field Apparel, aka the Good Brand, you are going to get some of the softest t-shirts and hoodies in the game, and not just for TCU. Y'all know at this point how much I love my Big Sky hoodie. I also have a very, very fashionable Arkansas hoodie that I had for most of my car ride down to Houston on Saturday. It let me down because BYU ended up beating the Hogs, but don't blame that on the good brand. Blame that on Sam Pittman. Anyways, I love my hoodies. I wear them regardless of the weather happening outside. And if you want a comfortable hoodie that you can just waste away your life in on the couch or in the car or wherever else it might be, head over to homefieldapparel.com. Make sure you use our code FROGSIN15. That's FROGS, IN15, for 15% off of your first purchase and 10% off of every subsequent purchase. That's FROGS in 15 at homefieldapparel.com and get yourself some TCU gear from the good brand.
Hey, we're hoping for a good weekend this weekend for TCU fans. We'll be previewing, if I hear back from our friend that covers SMU on the Public Football Network. So but in return, it's fine. Like, I think the rivalry has already started. But yeah, we'll be previewing SMU this week. Do you have any plans for this week? Are you going to do another mailbag? You're going to
Doing our
kind of see
mailbag.
where the wind takes you, or the moment
Doing our
takes
mailbag. Going to see what Sonny says on Tuesday. If he says anything interesting, we'll talk about it. And then, yeah, I don't know. We'll figure it out from there. We'll figure it out from there. I will say I might dedicate a little bit of time to Micah Parsons.
you?
I know he played at Penn
Yeah,
State for his college ball, but holy crap,
the dude's a
the
freak.
Cowboys beat the Jets so bad today that they've got Jets players deleting their Twitter accounts today. Sauce Gardner
Listen,
got off the field, was getting torched by Jets fans on the Bird app, and just shut it all down. Just shut it down completely.
listen, like, the Jets defense is really good, and what the Cowboys offense did, that defense was super, super impressive. But beating the Jets with Zach Wilson is kind of like beating the JV when you're the varsity starter. So
Look, you're right. You're right. That's why I think, the 30-10 win is nice versus like
yeah,
the 20-17 win. And now they've scored 70 points in their first two games.
yeah, they've
They've beaten the Giants and the Jets 70-10. I don't care how bad those teams are.
they're bad.
New York sucks.
Here's what I love. Is it's kind of given me, like, I think we might get a Rangers repeat here of a team that looks dominant and powerful until the games matter. So, like, not trying to put that bad mojo, but
That's going to do it for this episode of the Frogs Insider podcast. Because I'm going to have to go sports cry now.
I'm so sorry. I'm just speaking from a place of deep and personal pain.
Why you got to do that to? I mean, you got
I know.
to
I'm
Bruce
sorry. I'm
Bochy.
sorry.
Look,
I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's bad.
Anyways,
It's all good. No, we want to see our friends' teams succeed as long as they're not playing our own teams. That's what we try to convince ourselves, right?
Which is why we didn't talk the week of the 49ers Cowboys game last year.
Yeah, it's better for everybody. It's totally fine.
Absolutely.
Go Niners.
Okay. Anyways, that'll do it for this episode of the Frogs Insider podcast. Thanks to everybody who hung around and listened to the show. Don't forget, go and hit the like button on that YouTube channel, or is it subscribe? Hit the subscribe button on YouTube, like all of our videos. Make sure that you leave us a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. Follow Melissa at the Coach Melissa on Twitter. You can follow me at Frog Preacher. And we will talk to you later this week. Melissa's going to break down the SMU game and we'll answer your questions as well. But until then, go Frogs.
Go Frogs.